Assalamualaikum. Welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. Tonight we will be focusing on the growing pressure on Afghan Taliban government to take action against terrorism that is of course emerging from Afghan soil. Recently the quadrilateral group comprising Pakistan, China, Iran and Russia has called for decisive and verifiable action against terrorist groups, those who are operating from Afghan soil. Terror organizations like Daesh, Al-Qaeda, TTP and others continues to pose a serious threat not only to the neighboring countries but to the global peace as well. Pakistan has consistently urged Kabul to take action against these, of course, terrorist organizations, but terrorism is growing and terrorist threat is growing with each day that is emerging from Afghan soil. In today's program, we will be talking about, of course, these terror threats that these terrorist organizations are posing to the regional peace and its geopolitical dimensions as well. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by A.V.M. retired Ijaz Malik, who is senior analyst. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We are also joined by Colonel retired Sajid Aslam. Welcome to the program. Ijaz Malik Sahab, let me start with you. Firstly, this recent statement by a quadrilateral group that comprises of Pakistan, China, Iran and Russia, how significant is this statement from this group that has once again urged Afghan Taliban government to take decisive action that is visible to the world against terrorist organizations?
It is very pertinent and it has relevance because these are the countries who they are effectors of the terrorism which obviously emanates out of Afghanistan, and secondly they historically have a stake with Afghanistan and they want a stable, economically viable and peaceful Afghanistan in their neighborhood. So this is very important, and this is not only the militancy or terrorism that they have raised voice against, but they have flagged almost 20 points all in all in their communique, where they have certain on certain aspects they have even supported the interim Afghan government, and they are they indicative of the resolve of the regional powers to support in whatever form or manifestation, so that there is a a nose up attitude towards normalcy in the area, and Afghanistan continue with its rehab and further development, and they help the region to restore peace in the region.
Of course, and let me take the same question to you, Mr. Ijaz. Firstly, how significant is this statement coming from this important group, and also in your opinion, what challenges does this group face when we talk about pressurizing Taliban government to take action?
Thank you very much. The first important point to note is that it's a consensus amongst all the regional powers, and they have in a rare consensus they have highlighted and they have pressurized the Afghan government to carry out activities to counter the emerging threat from from Afghanistan. Important point to note is that all the regional powers, Pakistan is directly affected, Iran is directly affected, China is directly affected, as well as Russia, because Russia, they all are neighboring countries, and they have recently been Chinese even have recently been subjected to terrorism, roots of which go back to Afghanistan. So this is kind of a pressure which should let the Afghanistan people in Afghanistan and the government in Afghanistan know that the regional powers mean business, and if they control their activities of supporting terrorism or terrorism emanating from their country, then they can reap a lot of benefits from the economic incentives that these countries can offer. So I think this is a very welcome opportunity where all the neighboring countries have unanimously agreed upon in pressurizing Afghanistan to control terrorism emanating from that country.
Right. And to talk more about this, we are joined online by Brigadier Retired Waqar Khan, who is analyst. Welcome to the program. Brigadier Saab, in your opinion, how significant is this consensus statement coming from this important group that has obviously stakes in the region? And in your opinion, what key challenges they might be facing when we talk about, of course, actionable steps in pressurizing Afghan Taliban government to, of course, address the root causes of terrorism that is emanating from Afghan soil?
I think these are the four countries which are not only neighboring Afghanistan, but also have allowed Afghan, some diplomatic activity in the country. So these are, I would say, these are the friends of Afghanistan. And if you add Central Asia, because they also definitely have linkage with the Russian Federation. So this is the kind of group. If you look at the map where Afghan Taliban embassy not functional, so almost the rest of the world, they don't allow Afghan Taliban to even post their ambassadors or charges. So one thing is Afghanistan has to realize that these are your friends. But somehow they have taken it for granted. And look at the terrorist activities in the past 2 years. Look at the attack on a concert near Moscow. Then there was an attack in Iran by the people definitely having linkages with Kabul. Pakistan is directly affected. And also there was some activity in Central Asian republics. And I think they are also supporting the Pakistan movement, which is definitely affecting Chinese Xinjiang province. So all told, I think Taliban took it for granted that they could actually push their friends. And it's a very, very strange policy that normally in the region, you have good relations with your neighbors because neighborhood is always first because you have direct. And Afghanistan is a landlocked country. If you look at Pakistan or Iran, they are the only countries that can provide them some access. And Afghan target trade takes almost, I think, 70% of their trade. So all told, I think one is important thing is that there is a realization in all these four regional countries. And they are very big countries if you look at political and economic power. And Afghanistan has to go with them that they should dismantle these terrorist networks. And I think there's a list issued by them. This is very encouraging that all groups who are operating against Pakistan, including the Majid Brigade or BLA or PPP, or against Iran, certain other, the Jaish al-Adl, etc., against China or Russia or Central, they have been mentioned very precisely. And actionable, I think, things have been asked from Afghanistan that they have to now walk the talk.
Right. And of course, when we talk about walking the talk, Pakistan has been pressurizing and raising its concerns for quite some time, not only to the Taliban government in Afghanistan, but also at UN and other international stakeholders and other international levels as well. How do you see what options at this point at diplomatic level Pakistan has? Especially when we see it in the context of recent new push of Azme-Istehkam, movement that Pakistan has launched.
Despite the fact that Pakistan has been supportive of Afghanistan for almost 4 decades now, we have, helped and hosted millions of Afghan, brothers, families in the form of refugees, and we have supported them, negotiating various deals to restore peace. But somehow, much against the expectation of many analysts, after withdrawal of NATO troops from Afghanistan, they haven't lived up to the commitment or expectation which were positively being viewed after Doha.
And what is the reason behind that they haven't been able to live up to that commitment? Is it the ideological commitment of Taliban, Afghan Taliban, to other terrorist organizations that are operating within the region?
It has more to do with the genesis of the phenomena, which is Taliban. People thought, or they had, I would say, which have now proven not realistic, that probably they have learned their lessons and they have evolved, and they would, this second regime
Taliban 2.0,
it would be a better version of what we had seen in the 90s. But unfortunately, because the environment hasn't changed, the geography, the ethnic composition and demography hasn't changed, and their objectives haven't changed. So their conduct in power for almost 2 years now is no different than what we had seen on their part earlier. So what options do we have? I think Pakistan, despite being a major stakeholder as far as the support is concerned, or the negative impact of Afghan supported terrorism in the region, but Pakistan has not been able to make much inroads, and at time even we had to resort to the kinetic application to make them realize. So the only option is of a regional cooperation, either on the sidelines of SEO, or what we are discussing today, that the 4 major countries who are affected and who have their stakes in Afghanistan, they exert their collective pressures to put some sense into their thought process, and demand them to show some positive indication that they have some intent to cooperate.
But Ijaz sahab, when we look at Taliban, right, right. So Mr. Sajid, when we look at the situation in Afghanistan, and looking from the perspective that of course Taliban government is operating, do you think that they are unable to dismantle these terrorist organizations that are operating from Afghanistan, or they have support when we talk about, of course, ideological commitment or support for these terrorist organizations, that they have been unable to, of course, realize their commitments that they made to international community?
I think it is a mix of both. Though they have ideological commitment with Al-Qaeda, with Taliban's, with TTP, they also have a problem in exerting their writ throughout the country. To my mind also, the present regime in Taliban's, the present Afghan regime, is also leveraging their influence on TTP to negotiate with Pakistan, or to exert and extract as much of benefits or advantageous positions from Pakistan. So in any negotiations that are held, they have this, they use this TTP as a leverage, whereas their ideological.
And what are, in your opinion, the primary reasons that Afghan Taliban are reluctant to take decisive action against TTP, while we see that they are taking actions against some other terrorist organizations like ISIS-IK?
Well, with ISIS-IK, they have carried out decisive action, and for this, because they want to show to the world their resolve, that they are, and since they have also committed that no terrorist activity will be carried out from Afghanistan, from the soil, or the soil of Afghanistan will not be used for terrorist activity. So for that they wanted to show, and also because the ISIS, they had, or the Daesh, they had, they wanted to, their aim is to exert their own pressure or presence in the countries where they can, and since their ideology also is similar, so the Taliban were also afraid that they might exert influence and recruit more people from their own, from Afghanistan, and they create more trouble for them. So they were treated as an enemy, they were treated as a foe, and therefore they took decisive action against them. But as far as TTP is concerned, they are more, because TTP is Pakistan specific, they are not carrying out any action against any other country. But ISIS and other terrorist organizations which are present in Afghanistan, they have their presence in other countries also, and to leverage that, they have carried out, because of their ideological similarities, and also because they wanted to show to the world that they can control and they have control in the country. So they have carried out action against them, But for Pakistan, they are not. For TTP, which is operating only against Pakistan, they have not. One reason that that is very prominent, which comes to mind, is that they are using it as a leverage, as a bargaining chip with Pakistan for any future negotiations.
Right, and Brigadier Sahab, when we look at this situation and Afghan Taliban government refusal to take action against TTP, do you think this could lead to a larger conflict involving Pakistan and Afghanistan, and of course spill over beyond these countries and into the region?
Not really going into, I think, escalation at that level. But definitely, we've seen that borders are becoming hot. Pakistan has deployed heavily on the western side, and we've seen, at times skirmishes, at times they brought, tanks, and they were then taken care of. Because Pakistan, which is a battle-hardened military, and look at the firepower, even drone warfare and artillery and tanks, there's no comparison. And I'm sure Afghanistan would like to avoid it because there are 3-4 major traffic through which Afghan transit trade passes. They would not like it to shut it down. We've also realized there is a resistance movement which is picking up in Afghanistan. That is the National Resistance Front, which is led by Ahmad Shah Massoud's son, Ahmad Massoud. And he's mentioned, I think, with CNN start of September. So there were about, I think, 300 military operations conducted by this front. So Afghanistan, I think, is not very stable. And Taliban definitely needs strength. They need, and Pakistan is the one who has fought for their case, for diplomatic, let's say, recognition. The first, let's say, conference on their investment was held in Islamabad. And it is very, I think, I agree with Kansad, the possibility to draw certain concessions. One was definitely, return of erstwhile Fatah to that old, let's say, status. Then allowing them, free movement, maybe the illegal spectrum that military in Pakistan leadership had decided down upon, of dollar or, narcotics and weapon systems. And then, of course, there are so many other things, the smuggling of grain. So all told, I think the good thing is that Pakistan has been able to look at against the camp. There are 5-6 major prongs. Like you have a very strong diplomatic prong also in action. You have intelligence-based operation, and then of course military operation, capacity building. So I think diplomatic prong is now working. And if you look at the overall situation changing in the region, especially in the Middle East, Iran also needs strength. Russia is also under pressure. So I'm sure Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran have common interests, and this is at a very good beginning. I hope that Taliban would realize that to exist within the region as a responsible state, and they should. And we are the people of Afghanistan, that they have to cooperate with the neighboring countries.
Right, and when we talk about this situation, Mr. Ijaz, do you think with these, of course, there are over a dozen terrorist organizations operating at this point in time from Afghanistan, what are the risks of Afghanistan becoming a battleground again for the regional powers?
Well, if history is any reference, whenever we have instability in Afghanistan, their ethnic and tribal background, it takes precedence over any common sense. And historically, once we say Afghan government, it is predominantly the Kabul dispensation, and in distant provinces, because of the warlords and the tribal culture, it has never been a unified country per se.
And how does these internal challenges that the Afghan Taliban government is facing today, of course, keeps them away from dismantling these terrorist organizations? Do you think that is another challenge besides political will?
I think it is a combination of both. It's not only the capacity, it is the intent also. Particularly in the case of TTP, TTP is an offshoot and they have a lot of commonality with the Afghan Taliban. So they do not have intent to deal with TTP. Even if they are not, supporting them or funding them, at least they are facilitating them. They are not taking any. Least they could do was that they have intelligence sharing with Pakistan, and we could have, done some concrete steps to neutralize that threat. So, when, continuing with your previous question, to my colleague, where they had will against ISISK, they had handled that because they wanted to neutralize that, and they thought that ISIS growing influence in Afghanistan is a potential threat for Afghan government. So they had taken steps against them, but they do not see TTP with the same perspective. So they have not shown any inclination to
or actionable steps, of course.
Yeah, actionable
steps. And when we talk about this situation, Mr. Sajid, how long Taliban government can sustain this strategy or policy where they are pressurizing some terrorist organizations while they are supporting others with growing international pressure?
Well, I think regional pressure is quite indicator that they cannot carry out with this kind of tactics and this kind of policy for very long. But you see, Afghanistan government requires international recognition. They are quite you see pressed about it, that they want international recognition and they want to open up for the trade and everything else. Since about over 23 million Afghan people are below poverty line, and so get them to support them and to feed them and to clothe them, and for education everything, they require international support. So this kind of thing cannot last for very long, because then internal fissures will start taking place. When the economy goes weak, the internal warlords will start taking up their own business, like drug. They have been previously used to be the biggest opium producers. Now they are you see concentrating, or the reports, UNODC reports have clearly indicated that methamphetamines is they are the biggest, one of the biggest sources, and Pakistan is the major victim country from that. So therefore this policy cannot sustain for very long if Taliban think that they can remain in isolation and can sustain themselves. Well, it is not possible for very long.
Right, and could it lead to, of course, the international pressure is and regional pressure is growing with each day. Could it lead to military intervention at some point in time in future, or sanctions against Taliban government, because they are still seeking international recognition?
Yeah, international sanctions are already there. You see, the United Nations Security Council resolution already forbids any international transactions with Taliban government. But at the moment, for the foreseeable future, I think any international military intervention in Afghanistan is I would preclude it, because of the recent American experience, and prior to that was the Russian experience. Therefore, I think for the foreseeable future, any international military intervention in Afghanistan per se, for like what Americans held for 20 years, they remained present over there, and for Russia over 10 years. So that kind of military intervention is, I think, is not, because the appetite in the world powers is not there to sustain it for that long, or to militarily again invade Afghanistan and remain over there and get bogged down. But of course, if the Taliban's do not control the terrorist activities, surgical strikes from affected countries cannot be
like Pakistan did in
Pakistan did,
yes, a few months back. And when we talk about, of course, this terrorism issue, like Sajid Saab alluded to as well, that drug trafficking remains an important aspect of this whole conversation. So Brigadier Waqar, what's your take on this? Do you think that these terrorist organizations are playing a part in sustaining these drug trafficking networks?
Yeah, I think if you look at even Afghanistan, one of the major problems against the illegal spectrum. So if you look at illegal spectrum as a very wide spectrum, so it definitely includes drugs, includes weapons, includes terrorist funding, dollar smuggling, and then is the grain. So all told, because if you have illegal trade going across the border, definitely the terrorist group would basically like to run it as a franchise. Basically, I would say that Afghanistan Pakistan had become Afghanistan Pakistan mafia corridor. We have the CPAC, but this is another corridor. and millions of dollars would flow every year, including, as you mentioned, drugs is, I think, a big threat. And Afghanistan had been traditionally, a hotbed of production of these drugs, including heroin, and poppy cultivation. And a lot of chemical comes from India. It's very strange that Indian chemical is used for production of, meth and heroin. So definitely it's an international concern, and the regional countries are also affecting them, of course, international community. I would just like to add that how indirectly US is now funding Taliban. So this is, I think, Sagar report in front of me, and this was, I think, highlighted by Sarah Adam in one of the interviews in US, that so far in last year, US has actually sent $17 billion plus to the Afghan government. So it means basically Taliban, and there are different heads, include, refugees and internally displaced people and all that. But somehow, this is a money which is now Taliban also part of it they are using for running their government and maybe sponsoring terrorism. So I think that also has to be seen in the regional perspective. To combine $8.5 billion worth of arms and ammunition left in Afghanistan, so this makes a very, very dangerous, I would say, combination. So I think somebody has to
Right.
look at it, how this money is being actually used in Afghanistan.
Right, right. And let me take the same question, because of course drug trafficking remains an important issue when we talk about these of course terrorist organizations that are operating within Afghanistan and from Afghanistan. In your opinion, first, how they are using drug trafficking networks, and also what regional powers can do to dismantle this drug trafficking network?
Illegal trade and arms trade and drug trafficking has been part of Afghan, economy for ages. And unless and until there are alternate economic opportunities provided, you cannot demand or expect that there will be a substantial change in the economic outlook of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, after 9/11, once the ISAF forces, then NATO, and almost the entire world under the banner of United Nations, they came in Afghanistan. They promised ROCs, they promised reconstruction and economic change, but no substantial steps were taken. They pumped in a lot of funds, but those were funding given to the warlords to buy and retain their loyalties for the then dispensation in the form of maybe government of Karzai and those who followed. But there hasn't been any substantial economic activity. So if we really want to change, we have to support, world has to support them. For right now, there is a simmering humanitarian crisis. They are shortage of food, they have shortage of medicines, and while there are certain efforts to support them, but unless and until there is a recognition of Afghanistan, and the world has a reason to support them, formally and officially, for which Afghan regime has to show some flexibility. This particular communique also refers to, respecting the Afghan sovereign state to exercise their authority based on their cultural and religious ethos, that how do they want to treat their women folk, and while they demand them to give them economic opportunities and education, but still they say that it should be left to their discretion. So I think the regional powers, because Afghanistan is not on the radar of now global priorities, because we have a major conflict in Middle East, which right now has top priority, almost rivaled with the a similar kind of war Ukraine. Going in Europe. So the world focus is on these two issues, right. Afghanistan, or the effect of Afghanistan on the region is not the priority of neither
Right.
UN or the global player.
Right, Mr. Sajid, this might not be a priority for the world, but of course, instability, like we earlier discussed in Afghanistan, can lead to a larger instability within this region. So, how do you think that the international community could balance or should balance giving humanitarian assistance to Afghan Taliban government and at the same time pressurizing them to take actionable steps against counterterrorism?
Well, I think it has already been alluded by my colleague online that the international community has, and the US has also provided some funds to them. The international community is already requesting or has already pressurized Afghanistan to loosen its or to improve upon its policies towards women, children, and towards their education and other aspects. So, unless there's a match by the Taliban's to the demands of the Western powers of the international community, I think this will continue, and they have to. There's another aspect which must understand before we talk about the international communities trying to support Afghanistan, and that is the donor fatigue. The donors have for the last 20 years till 2021, they have been supporting Afghanistan in very large in a very large way, and they have seen that most of that has not been really been and we've seen that not that capacity just melted away. So, the international community plus the Afghan government has to come halfway, and they have to change their stance, and the international community has to give them some leverage and try to support them again, because one thing is different from in this government from the previous governments is that this government has established, has, for instance, they said that they will eliminate poppy cultivation, and they have done that. Yes. So, that means that they have the resolve and they have the means to do it. So, that is one aspect, positive aspect, which the international community can play up, and
But that has been replaced by other drugs.
Yes, that is because they have to somehow, because they only
keep the economy
the
going.
The point is that they have to keep the economy going, but they only promised. They did not say that they will not produce methamphetamine. They said they will stop poppy cultivation, and they did it. So, that means that they have the will and they have the capacity to do it. So, that can be supported, but then this has to be done diplomatically, and of course, economically they have to be supported, and some leverage has to be exercised on them, so that they also come halfway, and the international community also comes halfway and support them in improve their capacity to counter all these points that you have mentioned.
Right. And Brigadier Waqar, when we talk about this ongoing security situation in Afghanistan, what are the humanitarian consequences especially for Afghan refugees when we talk about these terrorist organizations if they keep on operating unchecked?
Pakistan is also closer to that figure, and it is already started. Now, there are also issues of, let's say, Qabla groups holding the property of the factions have got hold of a lot of commercial, agriculture, and residential property. That is one. The other is that there is a pressure now on Taliban to basically for governors, for feeding, for health, education. And if you add the refugees, let's say almost 4 million refugees return by next year, it's going to be a huge problem for them. So they have to realize, and Iran is also building a wall, basically to disallow any further, illegal movement. So they have to realize that, capturing Afghanistan is one, but governing Afghanistan is totally another ballgame. And for that, they need regional cooperation. They need the trade routes to be open. They need humanitarian aid. Even during COVID, Pakistan opened the door, for Afghanistan, which was unlike any other country. So we are basically their friends, and Pakistan cannot abandon, let's say, 40 million Afghans just for Taliban government. So that's why the transit trade has to remain open. Even 300,000 Afghans cross into Pakistan every month. So it means we have to continue despite whatever the policy, but it can't be sustained for long. So in case they create, let's say, hostility with the neighbors, even with the women, and then your resistance against them from especially in Northern Alliance. So I think they'll have very tough times. It's better to focus on development, dismantle the terrorist networks, and definitely get integrated into the region.
Mr. Ijaz, when we look at this situation moving forward, what in your opinion should be Pakistan's response? Of course, Pakistan has been raising this issue at a diplomatic level for quite some time now, but do you think Pakistan in future should be moving towards dual strategy of course raising its concerns at international level, at the same time for military intervention as well, or using the drones like we did previously?
You see, like any other sovereign state, Pakistan, retains the right to defend itself against all kind of threats. So it is in that perspective, while diplomacy, talks or persuasion should be our first choice, because ultimately they are our neighbors. We have a lot of common, history and ties, particularly with the Pashtun belt of Afghanistan. They have a lot of engagement and connectivity with their counterparts on this side of the border. But having said that, Pakistan has the wherewithal, Pakistan has the capability to neutralize any threats emanating out of Afghanistan. So we must retain that option. And whenever we should not declare our threshold, but whenever they cross our red line, we should selectively use that kinetic application.
Right. And very briefly tell us, moving forward, what should the Taliban Afghan government should do to take actionable steps in regards to these terrorist organizations?
First of all, they need to rein in the TTP from Pakistan, and they need to eliminate their training areas, they need to eliminate their safe havens. Unless they do that, and this should be visible, as Pakistan has been indicating to them, number of areas where Taliban sanctuaries exist, TTP's sanctuaries exist. So they should, the first confidence building measure they can do is that they should eliminate those sanctuaries and not allow the TTP people to cross into Pakistan from anywhere. Unless they, this is the biggest confidence building measure that they can do, is that they eliminate the training areas, the sanctuaries, the safe havens of TTP. Thereby, I think that is the biggest thorn between the two countries. And if they control Taliban, TTP, Talibans can win Pakistan over.
Right. Thank you very much, Colonel Retired Mohammed Sajid Aslam, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, A.V.M. Retired Ijaz Malik, for joining us in today's program. Thank you, Brigadier Waqar Khan, for joining us in today's program. Of course, when we talk about the situation and instability in Afghanistan, the rising terrorism from Afghanistan is a threat not only to Afghanistan and the region, but to the global peace as well. And a coordinated effort is needed by the international community and regional powers to, of course, ensure peace in the region. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care.